against civil rights at some level. And, his involvement, hiring of Wall Street people like Goldman Sachs and executives, 5, 6, 7, or 8 at this point in time, in his cabinet and inner circle. What I feel like Trump is doing is he's pulling the mask off of government. As dishonest, as careless as he is with whether something's true or not, he's pulling the mask off of government and showing what it's really about. Basically, that it's about, it's just pulling the mask off of government. I think with Obama, I think a lot of us were upset with him because we felt like he was very aloof, and we felt like there was a lot of progress that wasn't made that could have been made. Now, could it have been made, given the representatives in Congress and all the pressures that they had? Maybe not. I know that Obama he's a very intelligent and socially and mentally capable person. I mean, he's one of the, probably mental level of intelligence and capability, and not just mentally, but probably socially as well. That said, I think that the government is not the solution. It seems like it is, because if we push hard enough, if we show up at town halls in big enough numbers, show up on the streets in big enough numbers, we'll make some change. But really, at this point in time, there's such momentum in accumulating wealth among the hands of the few. It's just kind of accelerated on an exponential curve to such an extent that yes, we can still make an impact, but the trajectory is not changing in this current form of government. What I strongly encourage everybody to do is not resist, not fight. If we resist, we make the problem more difficult. If we resist anything in our lives, whether that be with issues within ourselves, whether that be with emotions within ourselves, or temptations within ourselves, when we resist, we give focus to which we're resisting, and that thing grows in power. So let's not create this in power. Revolutions, if we look throughout history, have never really resulted in a better standard of living or a better situation for people. What it does is it destroys infrastructure, it destroys buildings, shops, farms, machinery, and we end up being a lot worse off in the end. It doesn't really, we talk a lot about disaster capitalism. Well, that's, disaster government. Disaster capitalism may work in the short term. We blow up bombs, we spend more money on making, employing people and whatnot, making more bombs. But when it comes to tearing things down, we may not build those things back up again. And given the current situation of austerity measures throughout the world, in Europe, here, and elsewhere, it's unlikely that once we tear something down, then it'll be built up again. I strongly encourage, we definitely want to feel like we're powerful by blowing things up and overthrowing this government. Let me tell you, it's really easy if enough of us get together to overthrow this government. That's not a hard thing to do. When the will of the people are aligned in one direction in significant enough numbers, things topple very, very quickly. There will not be enough willpower behind the guns and machinery of our government to withstand any sort of, revolution. What I can tell you is, things are going to get more difficult for us to organize. The internet's going to be more difficult to navigate with the new legislation. I don't know quite what it's called, but right now we can surf the web. It's going to be a little bit harder to do that with that. I don't know what they call it, Internet Freedom Act or Internet, whatever that's called. We're not going to have free access to dissenting voices. We're going to have tiered pricing to access different aspects of the internet. Different aspects will become less available. It will be harder because the speeds to different accesses, different parts of the internet will vary up and down depending on the amount of money we want to pay access those. So they will be doing price differentiation, having different price points, and trying to maximize the profit curve on this, which means it's going to be really more difficult for us, especially more difficult for the poor person, to find dissenting voices about the government, to find dissenting voices that speak perhaps truth, something that we all have to kind of take with an open mind and verify for ourselves. That said, in one way the Trump administration is very exciting because it's obviously getting us motivated, but it's not changing the current paradigm, and that is we're still giving our power to the government. We're still kind of expecting the government to take care of things for us. And I don't know how many times we have to keep trying this to kind of realize it's not going to work. There's too few people in power right now, and they're an easy target for those with money. We only have 450 representatives, 100 senators, and the president and his cabinet, that's less than 600 people. And it's easy for us to target. Not us to target, but it's easy for people with money to target the government and influence them. And those people obviously want to be elected, and everybody has dirt on them. Everybody is vulnerable to, with enough money and enough coordinated action, you can basically topple any senator, and that's well known. And so it results in very cautious and conservative legislation by the president and the government. And we can keep on protesting and going to town halls, and that will make some action. It will slow things down and might, make some action, but we're putting a ton of effort and only getting an ounce of change. The question is, why don't we have direct democracy, where we can use internet technology to vote? Obviously, there's fears that somebody would manipulate, the coordination system of social media, or somebody would manipulate the electronic systems themselves to get to basically change the vote or change the decision-making process in favor of moneyed interest. That's always a risk. But I think the most important thing to look at is there's already forms of semi-direct democracy, like in Switzerland and stuff. And you even find those forms of direct democracy limited by, again, the constraints of international corporations that can move anywhere throughout the world. And it constrains even the most liberal democracies to make conservative actions that have resulted, especially even in Europe, in austerity measures, decrease in pension, decrease in other social services and social benefits for the population, which makes it harder for them to pursue their passions. They have to focus more on survival and less on being a creative force in the world. One of my greatest aspirations is how can we make the world into a creative force? And we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, the biggest permission slip not to do this is that climate change is climate change and climate disaster is getting worse year by year, and speeding up year by year. So we don't have a lot of time. We only have maybe really a generation or less to turn this around. Some people are estimating that there's a 2-generation lag after we fix it before the impacts of what we've done turn around. We will feel the impacts of what we've done, that is, for 2 generations. So, given the growing impact on our climate, the kind of, and it's like an exponential curve, our impact on the climate, the CO2, trapping sunlight, increasing, the temperatures around the world, creating, basically more tragic weather conditions, whether it be greater snowfall because it's a little bit warmer and so there's more snowfall in the Northeast, or more hurricanes, weather disasters, droughts, whatnot. We're hanging on now, but soon it's going to collapse. And we in the United States can't sustain using 30% about the world's resources for, I think we're about 5% of the world's population. We use about close to 30% of the world's resources. So what about the rest of the world? You know, especially if they, you know, right now with, you know, China and other parts of the world who are still improving their living standards. You know, the likelihood, if you look back at history's any prediction, is that we're going to go to war. And I think for myself and for most Americans who love China and have Chinese, who love, you know, people who are Chinese, who have, you know, friends who are of Chinese descent or celebrate Chinese heritage, who've been part of that heritage in some level, the last thing we want to do is have any sort of strife with that nation, or you know, create any friction, you know, and have create any friction between us or in any part of the world. You know, I mean, I think we want to connect and become part of a global community and grow from diverse perspectives. The military, you know, strategy right now is, you know, well, we consume 30% of the world's resources, so we're going to, you know, destroy any independent nation that comes up and starts to prosper too much, because they're going to take away the resources that we need. You know, it's going to cause price inflation, instability here in the United States. It's going to threaten the government. So we have this, you know, thing of, you know, toppling Libya. We did in 2011, you know, and involving, you know, a series of actions, whether it's through starting with the IMF and the World Bank, you know, proposing austerity conditions so that the money goes to international corporations, which, you know, largely flows to us because we tend to be the major beneficiaries of these corporations, partly because they're headquartered here or we're the major consumer base of them. So we tend to do favor policies, tend to be a major player in the World Bank and IMF, and putting these measures on various countries from that basically cause them to privatize industries, you know, cause them to, you know, when they privatize their industries, well, who's around, who are the private players who are best suited to become players in their markets? It's usually international corporations, which had their beginning in the industrialized world. A lot of them in the United States, and some of them who still employ a large amount of people in the United States. So this strategy of you know, kind of overturning governments that do not cooperate with us, with IMF or World Bank policies, that don't, you know, cooperate with, you know, various levels of pressure that we put on them, you know, they're going to be overturned because we can't afford to have somebody else taking up 30% of the resources. That's 60%. Then, you know, another 5% taking up 30%. That's 90%. You know, that's going to cause quite a bit of inflation. And I think, I don't know to what extent that's known by the U.S. government, how much, I think it's known, but I don't know what extent that plays in their decision making, but I imagine it does. And I think the reaction to that is not get angry, not go to riots, and not burn things down. That never works. We end up being like Somalia. We end up disaster. And I know it's such in our nature to want to riot and yell and scream and tear stuff down. It's not going to work. It's just absolute disaster. And, you know, climate disaster is going to happen. There's going to be, you know, water shortages. We have the dam right now in California that's could possibly break, and that supplies a large amount of the drinking water in California. I think it's the tallest dam in the United States, taller than the Hoover Dam, Oroville Dam or something like that, built in 1968. Well, that dam is, you know, already the spillway, there's problems with the spillway, there's a sinkhole next to it, it could collapse. And that's just the beginning. You know, that's the result of, you know, this erratic weather conditions that are caused by overall increase in heat being trapped by the greater amount of CO2. CO2s are molecules that, you know, trap the light waves